Welcome to Wordpath, the show about Oklahoma Indian languages and the people who are teaching and preserving them. Tonight is our second show based on the 20th Annual Conference on Siouan and Caddoan languages, which was held recently, June 2nd through 3rd, at the Wichita and affiliated tribes in Anadarko. This is a linguistics conference, and tonight I'd like to show you one of the papers given by one of the linguists present. The presenter is Catherine Rudin, a professor at Wayne State in Nebraska. She's been studying Omaha for many years. She's discussing an elementary course in linguistics that she prepared especially for a unique audience, namely Omahas who were not fluent speakers, but who wanted to learn more about their ancestral language and see what insights linguistics might have in the area of Omaha language preservation. By the way, Omaha is so closely related to Ponca, which is spoken in northern Oklahoma, that linguists usually consider those two languages to be actually two dialects of the same language. Another thing to notice is that Rudin mentions Francis LaFlèche, who was in Omaha himself, and he wrote extensively on his own language and culture. Let's take a look at the tape.
Basically, as David said, I'm going to just talk about a class that I've been teaching. I'll give you a little bit of background on the course, and then I'll talk about some insights, or at least some things that I noticed while teaching the course. This class was a linguistics course, a general linguistics course, that was offered in Macy, Nebraska, which is the Omaha tribal headquarters, site of the Omaha Nation Public Schools, which had the distinction of being on the front page of the New York Times a couple weeks ago as, you know, a school system in dire trouble. It's a school system which has a very high dropout rate and, you know, truancy and all sorts of problems. At the moment, there's a program that's just ending its first couple of semesters. I don't remember the official name of the program. People seem to refer to it as the Teacher Cadre program. It's a program to produce native Omaha, or at least community member teachers for the school, with the ultimate aim of, you know, improving the school system, and particularly the relation between the school and the community. All of these teacher cadre students are getting degrees in elementary or secondary education, mostly elementary, with an ESL endorsement. And when I first saw this, I thought, this is really bizarre. There's no need for English as a second language in the Macy schools. You know, all of the children are native English speakers. They're not going to be teaching ESL. But I guess the idea behind this is that one thing they would like these teachers to be able to do is to assist in the teaching of Omaha language, and the sort of closest endorsement that they could get to, you know, Omaha education was ESL. Like getting a foreign language endorsement in something like, you know, Spanish or French or something wasn't going to be terribly applicable. And for the ESL endorsement, they do have a requirement to take a year of a language, any language, and for these students that language is going to be Omaha, so they'll all be taking at least 6 hours of Omaha language as part of their program. They also, as part of the ESL endorsement, take, you know, a couple of other classes, language teaching methods and that sort of thing, and linguistics. They have one class in linguistics. And that was sort of where I came in. They asked me if I would teach this linguistics for the classroom teacher class in Macy. And I thought, now this might be kind of an interesting opportunity to use some of the Omaha data that I've sort of collected and filed away and not done a whole lot with over the years, to see if I could teach linguistics by using a lot of Omaha data as examples. And I had visions of actually learning a lot about Omaha myself in the process of, you know, creating all these classroom materials. So I sent David a paper title and said, I'll talk about insights about, you know, Omaha that I come to by teaching this class. And it turns out actually that most of my insights are about the students, and not particularly, I didn't learn a whole lot about Omaha, although some, I guess. But I found the group of students to be extremely interesting. I had spent a lot of time sort of in disconnected chunks over the last 10 or 12 years with Omaha elders, recording them and transcribing tapes and so on. But I had spent very little time with anyone under the age of 75 or 80 on the reservation. And during the last several weeks, I've spent 50 hours or so with this group of young Omahas, and it was very interesting to meet them, to get to know them, and to get to know something about their knowledge of the language and their attitudes toward the language. There were 16 students. All of them are sort of local people. They're all either Omaha or married to Omahas. They all live in Macy. A couple of them, I guess, live in sort of nearby towns. I know one lives in the town of Decatur, which is a few miles away. But they're all local. 4 of them are male, 12 are female. I wrote on here that their average age is mid-20s. It may be more like 30 or so. A number of them are sort of traditional college age, but then there are some that are older, including several who have grandchildren and who I guess are in their 50s. But they're a relatively young group, and several of them are sort of around 20. And Artis Eschenberg, who wasn't able to be here, as David told us earlier, actually taught 3 out of the 11 sessions. The way we organized the class basically was that I was the nitty-gritty linguistics person. I did phonetics, phonology, morphology, syntax, semantics, made them draw trees, made them parse things. And then Artis would come in every 3rd or 4th day and talk about child language or gender and language or dialects or the sort of fun stuff, and give them a little break from me torturing them. But I did also do some little bits on language acquisition, and I did a session on foreign language teaching methods that was most of one 4-hour day. So it was broken up just a little bit. I was really interested to discover that Omaha is not as dead as I had thought. My impression from talking to all of these 80 and 90-year-olds had been that really no one knew Omaha who was much younger than them. And to some extent that's true. None of these students would claim to be speakers, I think. None of them are fluent, certainly. But they know a lot more than I expected them to. They all know at least a little bit of Omaha. Even the ones who are not Omaha themselves have picked up words and expressions. Most of them have had some Omaha teaching, and they've gone through the elementary and high school programs that have been in place in various incarnations since the 70s in the Macy schools. And they've learned, depending on what era they attended the school in, they may have just learned to count to 10, but they may have also learned some conversation skills in Omaha. The language program in the school is getting to be quite a lot better thought out than it used to be. In many cases, when I was presenting some Omaha data to them, they would point out mistakes I had made, or they would say, "Oh yeah, I know that word," or they were obviously, they knew what was going on. They knew more than I thought. Several of them mentioned that they were teaching Omaha to their children, and what they seemed to mean by that was teaching Omaha words, particularly things like counting and relationship terms. But they were trying to teach some Omaha to their children. We had a daily exercise at the beginning of class each day, which I called language links. They were supposed to link language to their life by finding something to say about something they had noticed each day. They would bring in something cute that their child had said, and we would talk about what that showed about acquisition, or they would bring in a new product name that showed something interesting about morphology, or there was one lady who liked to bring in things that she had read on people's license plates, and we talk about how people present themselves through their license plates linguistically. But a lot of them would also bring in Omaha things. Sometimes these were funny. There was one who one day said, my child asked Grandpa how to say grasshopper in Omaha, and Grandpa said, Beiji hop hop, and the whole class just roared. They thought this was really funny. They all know the word beiji, which is grass, and they were able to appreciate the humor of making up a word for grasshopper. A lot of them talked about their Indian names, or the fact that members of their family called them by Omaha relationship terms. Particularly a lot of them mentioning that grandmothers or mothers-in-law, those seem to be the main carriers of this, would always refer to them by their Omaha name, or would always address them by their relationship term. Several of them during this language links part of the class brought up, I don't know quite what to call them, sort of emotive expressions that people use in the local community. Sometimes these were Omaha words that several people at various times mentioned Ashton, which, you know, Ashton, which I'm not really sure exactly what it means. It's sort of wow or something. They seem to, the examples they gave of how it was used were sort of, that it was something you said when you were sort of struck by something, or surprised perhaps,
or grossed out.
Or perhaps grossed out. Things like ehe for huh? What did you say? Sometimes just really just noises, I guess. There was one woman who said that she often says ee. I'm not saying it's the right intonation probably. Ee. And that people would laugh at her because that's something old ladies say. Again, just another, I said that, we say a with real low falling a. And I said, well, how do you say that? And he said, well, for instance, if someone assigned us a homework assignment, we'd say a. And from then on, when I assigned homework, this one particular guy would always, it's, disapproval. So people were sort of playing with these just little expressions that people used in Omaha. Several had family members who are fluent or fairly fluent speakers and mentioned hearing their parents talk at home. Two sisters who are in the class in particular have, their mother is a fluent speaker, and they would refer to her as the authority when correcting my Omaha. One had worked in the senior center and said that she had learned a lot of Omaha from hanging around up there, and that people would use a lot of Omaha. So basically they're, to some extent, still surrounded by Omaha in their daily lives, even though people don't necessarily converse in the language all that much. Some people do, and these younger people are hearing it and are picking up at least bits of it. These students are definitely interested in the language and value it highly, and that was another thing that I wasn't sure would be true. They all expressed a desire to learn more Omaha and seemed interested in seeing the bits of Omaha that I brought into the class. Sometimes this desire to learn is expressed in a negative way. They are frustrated or feel guilty perhaps at not knowing their own language well, feel that they should know it. But most of them seem to express a very positive sort of willingness to learn more and a desire to learn more. In particular, some of the non-Omaha spouses who were in the class, the ones who were married to Omahas, said that going through the class had made them feel better about taking the Omaha classes that they're going to have to take in the fall, and that having seen that it sort of works like any language, that it is a language that has sort of the same features and structures that other languages have, they felt that they would be able to learn it. People who speak comparatively well are admired. Several times I heard one member of the class compliment another member by saying things like, I can tell you grew up with the language, you speak it so well, you pronounce it so well, you really sound like a speaker, and that's sort of high praise. We dealt with the writing system, partly because everything I handed out was written, obviously. The use of a writing system for Omaha has been somewhat controversial and remains controversial. There have been several different orthographies around at various times, and there's a fairly strong contingent of elders, a small group but a vocal group, including one woman who's teaching a class at the community college, who feel that people should just write the language the way it sounds to them, and are opposed to having any sort of formalized orthography. The writing system that the school has been using for quite a while, and which I used in my handouts, is based on the Fletcher and LaFleche system. It basically is the Fletcher and LaFleche orthography, but with a few little quirks introduced here and there. It spells the with a TH, show with a CH. It's basically sort of spellings that look good to an English speaker. ZH for je. The bits that are a little odd are X for h. We've been using GH for h. There's a little raised N for the nasal vowels. And artists, Eschenberg and I, have sort of been pushing a little raised H for the aspirates, which hadn't been being used until recently, but seems to be catching on. The people in the class this summer didn't have any problem with it.
Hi, let me interrupt for just a moment to explain a little bit about those aspirated consonants that Catherine was talking about, that she would like people to write with a little raised H to indicate the aspiration. In English, we have one type of K. This is true of P and T as well, but let's say one type of K in English. If you talk about the letter K, we say K, and that's called aspirated because there's a puffiness after the K and before the vowel, K. If you hear someone say K, you imagine that they may have a French or Spanish accent, because in those languages, the Ks are not aspirated. So if you say K, you're not saying a different word, you're just saying the same word without the aspiration, so you have a little accent. Ponca has both types, so the word K means turtle, and the word K means the. Let's look at the rest of the tape.
But in the class, they said, what's that little H? And I showed them some contrasts of aspiration, and they said, oh, okay. And we sort of went on from there. They didn't seem to have any problem with it. A number of the students commented that the writing system is really pretty easy to use once you sort of get the hang of it. And one student in particular, who had been sort of hostile to it in the spring sessions during this May course, suddenly decided that writing is really good, and that if I know how to read this orthography, I can read the Swetland-Stabler dictionary, Mark's dictionary, which is the sort of the one piece of written material that's really accessible to a lot of people, and people like to be able to look up a word, find out how to say something, and if you know the alphabet, you can actually read it and pronounce it. From a linguistic point of view, it was really nice to be able to have them use that orthography, because it helped when we came around to phonetics. They were used to the idea of writing things by how they sound, and the vowels are really basically the same as in the sort of standard linguistic phonetic alphabet, and they had an easier time with phonetics than most linguistics classes that I've taught. I think because they had sort of worked through this Omaha alphabet first. Several people liked the idea that Francis LaFlèche, sort of one of theirs, at least partly, was the one that came up with this alphabet, and that one guy commented, so he was actually a linguist, and he was a good linguist, and yeah, he was. I went through Omaha exercises with them, and this is sort of getting to your second handout, in the areas of morphology, syntax, semantics, phonetics, phonology, and a little bit of comparative historical stuff. I gave them handouts that had Omaha material on them, and we always used these in a comparative kind of way. We would do a sort of general introduction to morphology, talk about English morphology, then we'd talk about whatever Omaha morphology we had, and we'd usually also talk about some other languages too. Frequently it turned out to be Japanese, for who knows why. Partly because the textbook I was using, which was the Fromkin and Rodman Introduction to Language that I've often used for general linguistics courses other places, they have a number of good Japanese problems in there, but we also used assorted other languages. But they would have this one batch of Omaha material to analyze and to compare to the other languages. There were a couple of times when, again, they didn't tend to challenge me in class, but they'd kind of tell me afterward that, that's not the way my mother says it. A phrase that I used in one of the syntax exercises was "to the house," and I said "the," sort of carefully breaking each word from the next one when I read it, and they said you'd never say it like that, you run it together. Yeah, which, we were also doing things like happiness in English, and we were sort of separating off morphemes, but they didn't like the way that I was saying it separated. Let me just walk you real quickly through some of the things that we used. I know you need your magnifying glass for this. In morphology, I did not go into any detail at all. Omaha morphology is complex and rich, and if we'd had a morphology class, I would have tried to go into a little more of the detail. What I gave them was just what you have on this first page of the second handout. A few examples of word formation, of compounding, some examples of some prefixes. The only prefix that I really gave them was the wa, indefinite. And actually there are several different was, I guess, and I'm not sure that these are all the same wa, but I decided not to fuss with it for purposes of this class. Just to see that, yes, you can break these words up into pieces that mean something, or at least look like they might mean something. Suffixes, I give them a few examples of a negative suffix and a future suffix, and some words that began to show the possibility to combine more than one prefix or suffix together. And then I gave them also an exercise where they didn't actually have to go into much detail, but again, just see that the words are made up of pieces. They had a homework exercise where they had to find more words that have the root act in English and some other things with English roots. And then I gave them just a few words that had the same root in Omaha and asked them to see if they could figure out what the root was. And a couple of them were very straightforward, and one of them was not. When we started talking about semantics, this is the next page, one thing I did was give them a couple of examples where Omaha and English sort of divide up semantic fields differently. color terms, English has more basic color terms than Omaha does, and we talked some about, how you create a word for other colors other than the ones that you have a basic term for. Omaha does, of course, have ways of saying things like brown and pink, but it doesn't have a basic color term for them, just like English doesn't have a basic color term for, whatever color this is. It's sort of, I don't know, brownish burgundy or something. And then we sort of, the flip side of that, the kinship terms, where Omaha has a sort of more complicated and richer system of using kinship terms than English does for a word like brother. You have all these different words, most of them based on just the same couple of roots, an older brother root and a younger brother root, but with different prefixes on it showing who's, whether you're addressing them or referring to them, and so on. And that things don't necessarily line up neatly for translation, that the Nagy uncle root doesn't refer to the same group of people that the English uncle refers to. And actually, this was an area where it turned out that people knew a lot of other vocabulary. I asked for examples of other kinship terms, and they knew a lot.
I want to thank Professor Rudin for allowing us to tape her presentation. See you next time on Wordpath.
Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita. Na hene yo hene, na hene yo hene, ana magwana kita, wa pene manaone kita.